religion isn't your thing, there's something special about Jerusalem. And when riding Jerusalem's light rail, one witnesses the city's diversity across ethnic, religious, and cultural lines, from the ancient to the modern. I usually keep these videos focused on public transportation from a technical, design, and engineering perspective, but to understand Jerusalem's light rail, one needs to understand the city itself. So we're going to dive a little beyond public transportation and into a topic that will likely spark debate in the comments section: demographics. Because there are two recurring themes impacting ridership that one needs to understand: diversity and economic hardship. More on these later. Unlike my first video about Tel Aviv's Red Line, which focused on what was implemented well and what wasn't, this one highlights what's interesting, unique, and worth noticing about Jerusalem's system. The Jerusalem Light Rail opened in 2011, beating Tel Aviv to the title of Israel's first mass transit system. In February 2025, it was extended further, both north and south. Like Tel Aviv, its first line is called the Red Line. A second line, the Green Line, is planned to open later in 2026, but that will be out of scope for this video. Jerusalem's Red Line is a full light rail at street level with no branches, no underground segments, and only two bridges with grade separation from traffic. Looking at the map, we see this line twists and turns often. To understand why, it is important to note that Jerusalem is a mountainous city with elevation varying between 700 and 850 meters above sea level. As such, topography is a key factor in determining the shape of the line. In general, the line connects the outer neighborhoods to the north and southwest with the city center, and provides accessibility along the main city center corridor. For this video, we'll divide it into 5 segments from north to south as follows: the northern extension from 2025, the original northern segment, the urban core Jaffa Street, the original southern segment, and the southern extension from 2025. We'll start in the urban core. The line runs in a northwest-southeast orientation along Jaffa Street, Jerusalem's main commercial center. The street is almost entirely pedestrianized, with only the light rail running through. This segment is 2.5 kilometers long and includes 6 stops, for an average of 500 meters between stops. The most eastern stop is City Hall, next to the old city walls. Pedestrians can carry on through the Mamilla shopping district to Jaffa Gate entering the old city. The most western stop on Jaffa Street is the Jerusalem Central Bus Station and the Yitzhak Navon train station, where passengers can transfer to intercity buses and rail respectively. Israel Railways takes passengers to the airport and on to Tel Aviv and the rest of Israel. Yitzhak Navon station is an interesting engineering feat in its own right, but that too is a matter for a separate video. West of that, the line turns southwest along the Cord Bridge, the iconic suspension bridge designed by famed Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava. More on Jaffa Street later. At the old city walls, the line turns north, stopping at Damascus Gate, also known as Shechem or Nablus Gate. From there, the route roughly follows the boundary between East and West Jerusalem, or what can be considered the Palestinian and Israeli parts of Jerusalem respectively. Yes, the comment section is going to get lively. The line continues north through the Palestinian neighborhood of Shuafat, and then into the Jewish neighborhood of Pisgat Ze'ev. This segment is 7.8 kilometers long with 12 stops, averaging 650 meters between stations. The alignment twists and turns to match the road network, which itself follows Jerusalem's mountainous terrain. The depot near French Hill also branches off this segment. The original northern terminus was at Chel HaAvir station in Pisgat Ze'ev. The 2025 extension pushed the line to the northern tip of the city in the neighborhood of Neve Yaakov, adding 4 stops and an extra 2 kilometers of track for an average of 500 meters between stops. From the Cord Bridge on the western end of Jaffa Street, the line turns to the southwest through various neighborhoods until its former southern terminus at Mount Herzl. Mount Herzl is Israel's national cemetery, similar to Arlington National Cemetery in the U.S. Adjacent to it is Yad Vashem, Israel's National Holocaust Museum. The Shaarei Tzedek Hospital is also served by the Beit Vagan stop on this segment. This section adds 5 stops and is 3.1 kilometers long for an average of 620 meters between stops. From Mount Herzl, the line was extended west to the Hadassah Ein Karem Hospital. The final two stops serve the hospital campus. This segment is 5 kilometers long and adds 8 stops. Approaching the hospital, the line descends a long winding mountainside with a dramatic scenic view. When I was a kid, before the light rail was introduced, whenever my parents took me to Jerusalem, they would avoid Jaffa Street. Back then, the street was noisy, congested, and polluted. This is typical for a main street in a Middle Eastern city. Today, Jaffa Street has been almost completely transformed, leaving the street only to pedestrians and the light rail. Since the line opened in 2011, this part of town has undergone nothing short of a renaissance. Turning the street into a public space brought a huge amount of foot traffic into the city center. Businesses are hopping. Though it's worth noting that many struggled, and some didn't survive during the long construction period. Nowadays, strolling through some of Jerusalem's most iconic spots, such as Machane Yehuda Market, Davidka Square, Zion Square, and others, is quite pleasant. Whoever took the leap of faith to transform a major arterial road in this way was a true visionary. Jerusalem has over 1 million residents. On weekdays, the light rail carries roughly 190,000 passengers a day. About 8% of the city's population are estimated to use it daily. Annual ridership stands at around 48 million passengers, placing Jerusalem 28th worldwide for light rail usage. That might not sound remarkable, but consider this. Every city with higher ridership has multiple lines, at least 4. Jerusalem achieves this with a single line, making it the highest ridership single-line light rail system in the world. Almost half of all trips, over 90,000 per day, begin or end at one of the 6 stations along Jaffa Street. The heaviest passenger loads also occur here, specifically between Haturim and Machane Yehuda Market. Roughly 40,000 passengers per direction per weekday travel through this stretch. With 186 departures per weekday, this translates to an average peak load of about 220 passengers per train. While precise global comparisons are difficult to attain, it's reasonable to conclude that Jaffa Street ranks among the most heavily used light rail corridors in the world. So why is ridership so high? As hinted earlier, the answer is demographics. Roughly a third of Jerusalem's population is ultra-Orthodox Jewish, and another third is Palestinian, predominantly Muslim. Both groups are, on average, of more limited means, have lower rates of car ownership, and have large families, meaning lots of kids. Among the remaining third, many are modern Orthodox Jews who also tend to have larger households. Low car ownership, a very young population, tourists, and students all combine to create heavy reliance on public transportation. By comparison, Jerusalem's Red Line carries 1.5 times as many passengers as Tel Aviv's Red Line, despite serving a slightly smaller and less dense area. High demand in the central segment occasionally leads to crowding so severe that not all passengers can physically board the train. In public transportation engineering, this phenomenon is known as left-behinds. This footage was taken on a Friday around noon at Machane Yehuda station. Fridays are peak shopping days in Israel as people prepare for the weekend. Left-behinds occur when demand exceeds capacity. This can happen for one of 2 reasons. Either capacity was not planned to meet demand at a specific time of day, or a certain train got delayed, causing an unusually large buildup of passengers. This case appears to be the latter, which is generally easier to solve. Several minutes had passed since the previous train, while the following train arrived shortly after and was not full. As a result, the issue resolved itself very quickly. That said, it's worth noting that even a small departure delay can easily propagate over time. If crowding persists in the long term, there are potential solutions. The line has 3 locations with a 3rd track, allowing trains to be stored or turned back if needed. Ora Junction, east of Haturim, and north of Damascus Gate. These enable partial line operations where some trains turn back before reaching the end of the line. In theory, when all available vehicles are already in service but demand in the central segment exceeds capacity, these turnback points could be used to concentrate service where it's needed most. If crowding is heaviest along Jaffa Street, for example, additional trains could operate between Damascus Gate and Ora Junction, increasing frequency through the busiest section. Jerusalem uses 2 types of rolling stock, a first generation introduced in 2011 and a second generation added in 2025. Both are operated as two coupled segments, forming a train roughly 70 meters long. While single vehicle operation is theoretically possible, I'm unaware of it ever being used. Each 35-meter segment has 6 doors, meaning each door serves just under 6 meters of train, a pretty decent ratio. These trains also avoid a problem seen in Tel Aviv, discussed in my previous video, where passengers can end up stuck without a door near the ends of each car. There is, however, an important difference between the older and newer trains. The newer vehicles feature double doors at the end of each car, improving passenger flow and reducing friction during boarding and alighting. Station naming is quite good, with most stations named after well-known landmarks or neighborhoods. Even those named after streets are easy to recognize. Examples of landmark-based station names that residents immediately understand include Givat HaTachmoshet, Damascus Gate, Central Station, and Mount Herzl. Thankfully, the Jerusalem Transportation Master Plan team, the authority responsible for planning the light rail, opted for more intuitive names than Neta in Tel Aviv. Trilingual announcements in Hebrew, English, and Arabic are another strong point. At stations where the name is the same in the 3 languages, announcements are kept short by saying the stop name only once, instead of repeating it in each language. Since many station names are shared across all 3 languages, announcements stay refreshingly brief. As a side note, the station with the most amusing name is Hamifletzet Playground. In Hebrew it means the monster, and is named after the park's iconic slide and indeed looks like a monster. Probably best to keep the name Hamifletzet. No need to scare the tourists. The extension to Hadassah Ein Karem Hospital has a beautiful pedestrian trail running alongside the tracks, winding its way around the mountain. If you have time, I recommend walking this urban promenade. It offers some of the most stunning views in Israel, overlooking the Sorek Valley and the western side of Jerusalem. Along the trail stands the picturesque Russian Orthodox Church of Princess Elizabeth, for which construction began in 1911 but was only completed in 2007. Given the high ridership of Jerusalem's light rail, it's fair to ask, should it have been built underground as a metro? After all, some full metro systems around the world carry fewer passengers than Jerusalem's single line. I believe the decision to build light rail was correct for the following reasons. Topography. Light rail vehicles can handle steeper grades than heavy rail metros. Jerusalem's mountainous terrain makes a conventional metro challenging. While it's theoretically possible to link mountain ridges by rail using a series of tunnels and bridges, such a system would be extremely complex and prohibitively expensive. Ancient burial sites. Throughout Jerusalem, especially near the Old City, underground excavations frequently uncover ancient burial sites. Jewish law prohibits disturbing graves, and construction would likely face legal challenges from religious institutions, causing major delays. Building at street level largely avoids this risk. The pedestrianization of Jaffa Street. The radical transformation of Jaffa Street happened because of the introduction of the light rail. Putting the line underground would not have likely generated the political will to close the street to vehicular traffic. We would have remained stuck with a noisy, congested, and polluted main commercial street. Overall, Jerusalem's light rail is a well-thought-out system that has had an immensely positive impact on the city. It has also made Jerusalem far more accessible for tourists, providing a direct, fast, and simple connection between the train station and the Old City. The line has helped spur new development as well, including several new high-rise buildings in its vicinity in the center of town. This is a classic example of mass transit being built where demand exists, and then generating even more demand in return. More light rail lines are on the way. To paraphrase a verse from the Passover prayers, may next year we celebrate on Jerusalem's Green Line. Special thanks to the Jerusalem Transportation Master Plan team for providing ridership data used in this video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like as a humble offering to the gods of the algorithm. Better yet, I hope this video earned your subscription to the channel. See you next time!